I smiled, reached into my bag, handed over my company laptop, still warm from the spreadsheet I'd been updating 14 minutes earlier. Then I pulled out the keyring. Clink, clink, clink. 11 silver keys, all labeled, all tagged in my own handwriting from 2009 when I rewired the access system myself because the vendor ghosted us mid-upgrade. And then I gave them the final one. A small brass key with a worn-down M etched into the handle. The key to the building. No one flinched. Not HR, not security. They had no idea what I'd just handed them, but they would. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number? But I knew the voice. Why are we locked out of our own offices? The CEO screamed, his voice jagged with panic. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the quiet street. You told me to return company property, I said. So I did. Let me rewind. 21 years. That's how long I kept that place running. Not just operations, not just facilities, not just budgets and compliance. Everything. Back when the company had 5 employees and a rented suite over a falafel shop, I showed up with a notebook, a toolbox, and a belief that if you fix the small things, the big things won't break. They didn't even have a business license in the right city. Guess who fixed that? I wasn't management. Not on paper. Never got the corner office or the bonus weekends in Tahoe. My title changed a dozen times over the years. Administrator, ops coordinator, office manager. Team mom, one CEO called me once, like that was supposed to be cute. But when a pipe burst at 3 a.m. or someone crashed the internal server by downloading 400 stock photos of smiling salad women, they called me. Can you just, they'd say. And I always could. And I always did. You'd think they'd remember that when the layoffs started. But no, HR sent me a calendar invite with no subject line, just quick sync. Tuesday, 9 a.m., conference room C. I already knew. The office was buzzing with whispers, budget cuts, restructuring, strategic pivots. The CEO had just hired a new branding firm to reimagine our corporate identity. Cost, $180,000. But apparently my salary was where they drew the line. I showed up at 8:55. I always showed up early. Habit. Conference room C smelled like nervous sweat and burnt coffee. Haley from HR sat across from me, straight-backed, expression practiced. Next to her, someone new from legal. Not even a hello. We're going in a new direction, Haley said. I nodded. Your role has been deemed redundant. I'd trained 4 people last year. One of them now had director in their email signature. Redundant, huh? They slid the folder across the table like it was an offering. 3 months severance, no acknowledgement, no handshake, no thank you. Return all company assets by end of day, the lawyer added, including keys, ID badge, electronics, and any property belonging to the organization. I just stared at them. Let the silence stretch long enough for someone to shift uncomfortably. And then I smiled. Want to know what they forgot? They forgot I was the one who signed the original lease. Back when the founder's credit score looked like a rejected SAT score. No one else could get approved, so I stepped in. Just to help, I'd said. They forgot I was still listed as the primary leaseholder. Never updated it. Never questioned it. Even after they moved floors, remodeled, doubled in staff, my name remained. I'd reminded the old CEO once, back in 2015. He laughed and said, well, if anything ever goes south, I guess you own the place. We both chuckled. I didn't bring it up again. So when I handed over the building keys that morning, I knew exactly what would happen. By 9:32 a.m., I'd already called the property manager. By 10 o'clock, the locks had been changed. By 10:27, the CEO, Nathan, called me in a full-blown meltdown. You can't just lock us out, he shouted. Read the lease, I said calmly. You don't own the office, you rent it, and you failed to renew. He went quiet for a second. You wouldn't dare. Should have thought of that before you let security escort me out of a building I legally occupy. They thought they fired me. What they didn't realize? They evicted themselves. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was justice. Corporate justice. The quiet kind. The kind that walks out with a folder in one hand and 21 years of leverage in the other. And now? Now, the countdown had begun. 30 days to vacate. Unless they wanted to deal with me. And this time, I wasn't picking up after anyone. By the time the CEO's angry voicemail finished blaring through my phone, I'd already lit a lavender candle and poured myself a cup of chamomile tea. He was screaming something about breach of protocol, miscommunication, and legal action, but all I heard was panic wrapped in entitlement. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because I had the lease. And more importantly, I had time. Let's rewind a bit further. Back to June when I first noticed something wasn't right. I was sorting through the monthly vendor invoices. Normally, I'd get a renewal notice from the property management company around that time of year. I remembered it like clockwork. Always a quiet little PDF attachment with lease renewal confirmation in the subject line. But this year? Nothing. I flagged it mentally. Not out of spite, just habit. It's what I did. I noticed things. Then I got curious. I opened my old Ops backup folder on my personal drive. The one I was never technically supposed to keep, but did anyway because, well, let's be honest. If I didn't, no one would. There it was. The original lease, signed July 2002. Co-signed by me. Not as a witness. As tenant of record. I'd only agreed to it back then because the founder, Jared, asked nicely. Just until we get the credit sorted, he said. I'll owe you forever. Forever turned out to mean exactly 14 months until the company started pulling in revenue. Then it was like I disappeared. Except I didn't. Because no one ever changed the leaseholder. Not when we expanded. Not when we moved up 2 floors. Not when Jared stepped down and Nathan took over. My name was still on every amendment, every HVAC upgrade, every renewal clause. And then I saw it. Section 4B. If lease renewal is not submitted in writing by the lessee within 30 calendar days of expiration, the tenancy reverts to month at property management's discretion. Failure to maintain active tenancy may result in forfeiture of occupancy rights and priority tenancy reallocation. In other words, they missed the deadline. And I still had control. That was June 3rd. They fired me on July 1st. I could have warned them. Sent a quiet reminder, a nudge. Hey, just checking on that renewal? But they didn't even look me in the eye during my termination meeting. Didn't thank me. Didn't acknowledge the 2 decades I gave them. Just handed me a standard form letter and walked me out like a temp. So no, I didn't remind them. I waited. And on August 1st, with the renewal window long closed and no communication from them or legal, I walked into the property manager's office. Calm, collected, and carrying a manila folder labeled in black Sharpie. 2002 to 2025. Lease control, Harkins. Thomas, the property manager, blinked at me like he was seeing a ghost. Miranda? In the flesh. He pulled up the records while I unpacked the documents, laying them out like a courtroom drama. Lease, amendments, email printouts, signed service agreements. All roads led to me. When he saw the missing renewal confirmation, he looked up slowly. They didn't send anything. Nope. And you're terminating? Yep. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. This is gonna get messy. That's not my department anymore, I said. By the time word reached Nathan, it was already too late. Locks were rekeyed, mail was being redirected. A new tenant, an AI health startup called Neuromint, had already signed the next lease at double the rate. Apparently, they'd been waiting for a chance to get that office space for months. All they needed was a vacancy. And I'd just created one. That evening, I got a call from Lenny, my longtime friend and real estate attorney. He'd helped review the lease when I first signed it, back in the days when we both still had landlines and wore beepers to work. "You sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "They made the decision for me," I replied. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was clarity, and the kind of liberation that only comes after years of being overlooked. They forgot the rules. I remembered every clause. They discarded me. I held the deed to the building in my drawer. They underestimated me. I let them. And now? Now the countdown was real. 28 days to vacate. And the clock had already started. Back at the office, chaos was beginning to boil. Nathan called the property manager. Got nowhere. Haley from HR emailed me, cordially, asking if I'd be willing to assist in resolving a sudden real estate oversight. I didn't respond. Instead, I updated my lease termination file and added a sticky note. Do not engage. Let the paper do the talking, because they may have fired me, but I still held the pen. The first real sign of panic came 3 days later. It wasn't the flurry of emails from Haley's HR team or the sudden uptick in LinkedIn messages from people who had once walked past my desk without so much as a "good morning." It wasn't even Nathan's third voicemail, which alternated between fake concern and veiled legal threats. It was Dan from facilities, the only person in that building, besides me, who ever knew where the breaker box was without asking. He texted at 7:46 a.m. "Hey, Miranda. Did you change the HVAC provider login?" I stared at the message for a long moment, coffee mug in hand. The question felt simple, but what it really meant was something else entirely. It meant, the building doesn't know how to breathe without you. Back when we first moved into that space in 2010, the HVAC system was a disaster. Old coils, miswired thermostats, and a basement unit that looked like it had survived World War II. The vendors were useless, overpriced, and mostly forgot we existed. So I learned it myself. Spent a weekend crawling through manuals and YouTube tutorials, translating technician language into something usable. Created a custom binder with colored tabs for every vent zone, pressure reading, and sensor quirk. Nobody asked me to do that, but everyone relied on it. By 2012, we stopped outsourcing entirely. I negotiated the service contracts, managed the accounts, and rerouted the payment structure through a shared ops business account, under my name with full administrative access. Nobody ever changed that. So when Dan tried to log in, only to find that the two-factor authentication was routed to a number no longer on the company payroll, he messaged the only person he trusted to tell the truth. Me. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to help Dan. He was one of the good ones. Quiet, competent, never talked down to me even though he was 20 years younger and built like a lumberjack. But because I needed them to feel it. Just a little. To feel what it's like when the lights flicker and nobody knows which breaker trips when the espresso machine and server rack are both running. To feel what it's like when you fire your infrastructure and then realize your infrastructure had a name. By Friday, the signs were all there. The printer jammed on floor 2. Nobody could fix it. The cleaning service didn't show up. A notice from the city arrived. Overdue utility payment. They'd apparently been trying to route payments through an old P.O. box that was deactivated 3 years ago. Every system, every tiny cog I'd maintained in total silence, started stalling. And that's when the panic turned into desperation. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Lisa, one of the newer execs in the finance department. We'd only exchanged a few pleasantries during her onboarding, but I remember she brought in donuts for the team one morning and made sure to leave one at reception for me. "Miranda?" she asked hesitantly. "I know this is awkward, but I was wondering if you had a minute." There was something in her voice I hadn't heard in a while from anyone in that company. Respect. And maybe, just maybe, remorse. We met at a small cafe halfway between my house and the office. Neutral territory. She wore business casual. I wore jeans and the cardigan with the fraying sleeves I refused to throw away. She didn't waste time. I wasn't part of the decision. she said, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry for how it happened. I nodded. Thank you. We're struggling, she admitted. Haley's flailing, legal is overwhelmed, Nathan's yelling at everyone, and honestly, I don't think anyone knew how much you were actually doing. That much was obvious. She hesitated. I don't expect you to help, but if you have any guidance on what we're missing or what steps we can take. I sipped my tea. Then I asked a question I knew would stop her cold. Who's listed as the lessee on your general liability insurance policy? Her eyes widened. I don't know. Exactly. I let that sit, because it wasn't just the lease. It was everything. The compliance protocols, the IT vendor authorizations, the janitorial service renewals, the pest control contract, the security codes for the underground parking garage. All of it ran through me, not out of ego, out of necessity. Because over 2 decades of being just admin, I became something else. The spine of the building, and now they were trying to walk without it. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh notebook, labeled the front. Endgame, Q3 transition plan. Not for them. For me. Because it was time to do what I'd done every quarter for the past 21 years. Prepare for what comes next. I got the confirmation email from the court on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line, Notice of Acceptance, Leaseholder Termination Petition. Timestamp 3:17 p.m. I sat at my dining table, laptop open, a manila folder beside me labeled in block letters. Termination Final. Attached was the official notice. Plaintiff, Miranda G. Harkins. Defendant, current occupant, Suite 201-221. Cause, failure to renew lease within contracted window order. 30-day notice to vacate property, effective immediately. Enforcement, authorized upon delivery of notice. I didn't smile, not out of bitterness, but because when you've spent your life cleaning up messes for people who never once said thank you, justice doesn't look like a celebration. It looks like clarity. The next step was routine. Print 3 copies of the eviction notice. 1 for the property manager, 1 for the county court, and 1 for the door. Thomas, the building's property manager, met me outside the main entrance the next morning. He had a clipboard under one arm and an expression that hovered between awkward and impressed. You sure about this, Miranda? I've been sure since the day they walked me out like a temp who forgot her badge. He nodded, handed me a zip tie. We walked up to the front doors, glass panels, smudged from too many hands and too few cleanings. The receptionist, someone new, probably another temp, watched us approach, confused. She leaned forward. Can I help you? Thomas cleared his throat. Just delivering legal documentation. She blinked. Do I need to? No, I interrupted gently. Just tell your boss to check the front door. I zip-tied the fluorescent orange eviction notice right at eye level. It flapped slightly in the breeze. Bold font, black letters, 30-day deadline. Stamped with the official seal. That was August 6th, which meant by September 5th they'd be gone, either voluntarily or with county enforcement. I could already feel the storm forming inside. By 10:12 a.m., Nathan had seen the notice. By 10:17, my phone buzzed with a call from Haley. I didn't answer. By 10:24, she texted, Miranda, what is this? Why would you do this? Please call me ASAP. I didn't. Because what was there to say? They'd built a company on the backs of people like me and convinced themselves that we were interchangeable. But here's the thing about infrastructure. It only seems invisible when it works. When it stops, everything breaks at once. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, their legal team had finally opened the scanned documents from the court. Lisa from finance forwarded me a screenshot. Subject, urgent, leaseholder confirmation, plaintiff Miranda Harkins. Subhead, eviction proceedings initiated. It included the scanned lease, my signature, the missed renewal clause and the updated clause from 2015 that gave the leaseholder the sole right to terminate with 30-day notice in the event of non-renewal. All legally binding, all enforceable. No loopholes, no backup plan. No one had even bothered to read the contract before firing the woman whose name was on it. That evening, Dan texted again. They're freaking out. HVAC went down again and no one can get in touch with the contractor. They thought the autopay was still working. It wasn't. Because that autopay came from a shared ops account, I closed the day after they terminated me. Then another message. Also, Haley said the new cleaning crew quit. Something about unpaid invoices from last month? Yup. Because that contract was under a month-to-month agreement, I managed directly. They hadn't even updated the payment info. One by one, the pillars were crumbling. Not because I broke them, because I'd held them up for 21 years, and when they let me go, they didn't know how to replace me. You can't replace something you never bothered to understand. On Friday, I received an email from Nathan. Subject: urgent. Request for discussion. Lease and operational oversight. His tone had changed. Gone was the arrogance, the condescension, the assumption that I was some middle-aged fixture collecting a paycheck. Now he was asking, not ordering. He wanted to find a resolution. He wanted clarity on next steps. He even ended the message with, "I appreciate everything you've done." Too late. That night, I sat in my backyard with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip behind the fence line. My old cat, Rufus, curled on my lap. He purred like he knew something big had shifted. I thought about all the times I stayed late for them. The office Christmas parties I helped organize, without pay. The dozens of onboarding binders I built from scratch. The night I missed my sister's birthday because someone jammed a badge in the elevator slot and nobody else knew how to reset the system. And then I thought about how they fired me. No handshake, no farewell. Just HR, a security guard, and a laptop box. So no, I wasn't taking Nathan's meeting, because the countdown had already begun. They say corporate culture is about resilience, adaptability, quick thinking. But what happens when the very foundation you built your company on walks out the door, holding the original lease agreement and 3 decades of memory? You get Monday, August 19th, 17 days before the eviction deadline. The morning started like any other, for me at least. Coffee. Quiet classical music on the radio. Rufus curled under the table, swatting at a pen I'd dropped. I was working on a puzzle. 1,000 pieces. For a scene. Therapeutic. Clean edges. Clear rules. Meanwhile, 4 blocks away, the walls were closing in. At exactly 8:12 a.m., I got a message from Lisa. Just a heads up. HR's in full damage control mode. They tried to call the landlord. Got nowhere. Dan says they asked him to break into the maintenance closet. He refused. Said it felt illegal. Proud of him. I grinned. A minute later, Dan texted me directly. They're calling it a rogue lease situation. Nathan said he's launching a formal internal review. Whatever that means. Translation: he's blaming everyone but himself. Classic. Then, just before lunch, my phone rang again. Private number. I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity won. Miranda speaking. The voice on the other end hesitated. Hi, this is Clara. I'm the executive assistant to the board chair. Clara, I vaguely remembered her from holiday parties. Always polite, always overworked. I was asked to reach out. The board would like to schedule a conversation, off the record, about the lease situation. We're hoping to get your perspective. There it was. Not the CEO, not HR, not legal, the board. They'd realized what Nathan never did. The only person with leverage in this mess was the one they let go without a second thought. I stayed quiet for a beat, then said, I'm not sure I have any perspective that wasn't clearly outlined in the documents I submitted. Clara paused. I understand. It's just, the board wasn't made aware of your status as leaseholder. They're concerned. I bet they were. Investor pressure. Press inquiries, operational shutdowns. No plan B. They wanted to talk. They wanted me to fix the problem they created. But here's the thing about leverage. Once you give it up, it's gone. And I'd already decided. This was closure, not collaboration. I'm not available for meetings, I said gently. But I wish you the best of luck. She thanked me anyway. At least someone had manners. By midweek, it was obvious the cracks were becoming fractures. Dan called during his lunch break. They tried to host an all-hands meeting to reassure everyone, he said. Nathan called it a misunderstanding in paperwork logistics. I snorted. Is that what they're calling a court order now? He laughed, but it was strained. They're losing people. Real talent. Marketing director gave notice. IT leads interviewing elsewhere. No one wants to stay in a sinking ship. Good for them. Honestly? Dan said. Good for you. He paused, then added something I hadn't expected. You were the best part of that building, Miranda. You didn't just keep it running. You cared about it. About us. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Dan. That means a lot. That evening, I opened my old company inbox. Technically, it was deactivated, but they forgot to kill the cloud sync to my personal archive folder. Another oversight. I wasn't snooping. I just wanted one thing. My original onboarding email. Found it, dated July 3rd, 2002. Subject. Welcome to the team, Miranda. Message body was simple. Short. Written by Jared, the founder. Thanks for taking a chance on us. We'll never forget what you're doing by helping us get on our feet. This company will always have room for you. Always, huh? I printed it out, taped it to my fridge. Not out of spite. Just a reminder that promises don't mean much unless the people making them remember. By the end of that week, Haley sent a mass email to former staff, anyone who'd been part of operations in the last 10 years. Subject. Request for shared documentation, critical systems access. Body. We're reaching out to former team members who may still have knowledge of legacy systems, access information, or vendor contacts that were not properly transferred during previous transitions. Any assistance would be appreciated during this period of restructuring. Translation. We're out of lifelines. At 11:24 a.m. that Friday, Nathan made one final move. He showed up at my house. I watched him from behind the blinds, standing awkwardly in my driveway, hands in his pockets, glancing up at the front door like a man who realized too late that the elevator wasn't coming back down. He didn't knock. He just stood there. Maybe trying to build the courage. Maybe just hoping I'd come out. I didn't. Rufus watched him too, perched on the windowsill like a little lion guarding a kingdom. After 2 minutes, Nathan turned and walked back to his car. No words. No apology. Just a man finally realizing the cost of forgetting the woman who held the keys. September 5th. Eviction day. The morning sun stretched across the city like a curtain slowly pulling back on a final act. I stood by my window, sipping black coffee from a chipped ceramic mug I'd kept since my first office job. Rufus curled by my feet, flicking his tail in slow, lazy motions. Across town, 4 blocks away, Suite 201-221 was no longer theirs. The orange notice stayed on the door until 8:07 a.m., when the county marshal showed up with a clipboard, a neutral expression, and a roll of industrial-grade zip ties. Protocol. No drama, no exceptions. That office had once buzzed with over 100 employees. Open concept floor plan, glass-walled conference rooms, plants named by interns, an espresso machine that hissed like a dying dragon, and printers that jammed only during board presentations. Now? Silent. Furniture half-packed. Desks still labeled with names that had already disappeared from Slack. Empty La Croix cans stacked in recycling bins that no one had emptied in over a week. Whiteboards filled with half-erased strategy scribbles, a single yoga ball chair abandoned in the hallway, and a notice taped to the door that read, plainly, vacate order executed. Tenant removal complete. They didn't go quietly. Of course they didn't. Nathan had spent the final week trying every route possible. A last-minute letter from a law firm that clearly hadn't read the full lease. A phone call to the building owner, who redirected him back to the property manager, who redirected him back to me. An offer to negotiate terms via Haley, who wrote that she hoped we could find a collaborative solution that benefits all parties. I didn't answer that one either, because what was left to say? I hadn't sabotaged them. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't aired their laundry or rallied angry ex-employees. All I did was stop holding the door open. And without me, the whole place shut down on its own. Dan texted me that morning. "It's over. They're gone. Place looks like someone unplugged the ambition and forgot to charge it again." He sent a photo. Empty floors, chairs stacked in corners, the ghost of an empire that forgot who built its foundation. Then a second photo. It was my old desk. Still there, shoved near the break room. A small framed photo of my dog sat on the shelf. I hadn't even realized I'd left it. Underneath it, a sticky note. "Miss you already. Dan." I walked to the closet in my hallway and pulled out the folder labeled Closure. Inside, all the documents. Lease termination confirmation, final payment receipts, eviction order acknowledgement. The contract from Neuromint, the AI startup moving in next week. Clean, clear, sealed. The new tenants had already begun painting the walls. Something fresh, muted, modern. They'd sent me a gift basket. Artisanal tea, a handwritten note. "Thank you for making space for us. We'll treat it well." They even asked if I'd consider consulting during their transition. I said I'd think about it. At 12:34 p.m., I got one final email. From Nathan. No subject line, no caps. Just, "I made a mistake. You didn't deserve how we treated you. You were more than just staff. You were the structure." I didn't see it. Until it was too late. No request, no question. Just words. That was the first honest thing I'd heard from him in years. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Some doors don't need reopening. That evening, I walked to the kitchen drawer, reached in, pulled out the old brass key, the one with the worn M etched into the handle. It didn't unlock anything anymore, but it had once unlocked everything. And now, it was mine to keep. Not because it gave me access, but because it represented value. Proof that I'd been there, that I mattered, even when no one noticed. I hung it on the small hook next to my front door, right between my first paycheck stub from 1981 and the handwritten note Jared gave me the day we moved into the downtown office. "This place only works because of you. Don't let us forget that." They forgot, but I didn't. You see, this story isn't about revenge. It's about being erased. Quietly, systematically, until one day you're just gone. And they don't even feel the difference. Until everything falls apart. And then they remember. Too late. It's about leverage. Not the kind you swing around. The kind you earn. Quietly. Over time. Piece by piece. By being the one who shows up early. By fixing the leak no one else notices. By remembering the password. By holding the key. The next morning, I took a walk downtown. Passed by the office building out of curiosity. The new sign was already up. Suite 201-221. Neuromint headquarters. The windows were clean. A delivery truck was parked outside. New beginnings. I didn't stop. Didn't linger. Just smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and kept walking. Wind in my hair, peace in my chest, closure in my pocket. Because I gave back everything they asked for. And I left with everything they didn't even know I owned. At my brother's promotion dinner, I was seated at the kids' table. Plastic chairs, no place setting. Just a flimsy paper tag taped to the corner of the tablecloth that read, "Jessica, unemployed and unwanted." Laughter rolled across the room like a wave. His boss, a broad man with a smug grin and too much cologne, pointed in my direction and chuckled. "She actually came?" He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. I stood up slowly, my wine glass still in hand. I locked eyes with the man who held my brother's career in his sweaty palms. "If I were you," I whispered, "I'd check your stock prices." The room didn't go silent. Not yet. But someone choked on their drink, and for the first time that evening, my brother stopped smiling. 6 months earlier, I wasn't unemployed. I was head of compliance for a mid-sized fintech firm, a job that demanded 12-hour days, regulatory audits, and zero room for error. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and I was good at it. I'd worked my way up from intern to department head in just 5 years. The kind of rise that doesn't come from favors or networking, but from showing up when no one else would. Weekends, holidays, late nights, all logged in spreadsheets, all for a company that told me I was family. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, the CFO walked into my office and shut the door. "Jessica, this isn't personal," he said, not meeting my eyes. "We're restructuring. Your role has been consolidated." Consolidated. I had spent 5 years building that role from scratch. I packed my things in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went home, opened a bottle of wine, and stared at the blinking cursor of my untouched resume. My brother, Thomas, didn't call that week. Didn't text. Didn't ask how I was. He'd always been the golden child. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, fast-tracked into the tech world through Dad's connections. I didn't resent him. Not at first. But growing up, I was always Thomas's sister. Not Jessica. Not a person with her own dreams. Just an accessory to his shining resume. Still, I supported him. Every step of the way. I clapped the loudest at his college graduation. I bought him champagne when he landed his job at Vantage Systems. I even reviewed the fine print of his first equity agreement. Pro bono. So when I lost my job, a single message from him would have meant something. Instead, 2 weeks later, I got a glossy invitation in the mail. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Thomas Langford's promotion to executive director, hosted by Vantage Systems." The envelope was addressed to Miss Jessica Langford. No guest, no +1, just me, alone. "You're not seriously going, are you?" That was Claire, my best friend since college. We were sitting on her couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers and judgment. "You don't go where you're not wanted. That's a rule." I looked at the card again. The company logo gleamed in raised ink. The venue? An exclusive rooftop overlooking downtown. The kind of place you only get access to if you're either rich, important, or someone's pawn. "Maybe I want to remind him who helped him get there," I said, folding the invitation in half. "Besides, I have nothing to lose." The night of the dinner, I wore a tailored navy dress. Clean, sharp lines. Hair pinned. Heels that hurt like hell. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to observe. The room was filled with suits, champagne, and conversations layered in ego. People I had once emailed with. People I had helped through audits, all pretending not to recognize me. Then I saw the table. Small, off to the side. Decorated like a joke. Paper plates and cheap party favors like someone's idea of fun. And there it was, my place card. Jessica, unemployed and unwanted. The words were handwritten. Carefully. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. "That's just cruel," said a quiet voice behind me. It was a woman I didn't know. An intern, maybe. Her eyes were wide. Did they really put that on purpose? I didn't answer. I just walked straight to the center of the room, where Thomas stood clinking his glass with a spoon. Behind him stood his boss, the man who'd laughed. "I'd like to raise a toast," Thomas was saying, "to the people who matter most." And that's when I interrupted. Not loudly. Just enough for the people around us to hear. "If I were you," I said to the CEO, "I'd check your stock prices." He didn't laugh this time, because 2 hours later, an investor alert went out. And by Monday morning, Vantage Systems was under financial scrutiny. And I wasn't unemployed anymore. The taxi ride home after the dinner was silent. I stared out the window while the city lights blurred past, my hands still clenched around that place card. Unemployed and unwanted. Not just a joke, a message, a declaration, one my own brother was too spineless to stop. I didn't cry. I was too focused for that. Because somewhere between the laughter and the toast, I'd remembered who I used to be. The quiet girl with the clipboard at compliance meetings. The one who caught 3 internal fraud cases in 4 years. The one who'd flagged suspicious activity that saved the firm over $9 million in fines. They thought I was invisible, and that made me dangerous. Back at home, I pulled up my old laptop, the one I hadn't opened since my termination. It was still full of bookmarked portals, SEC filings, industry databases, habits of a mind that never truly shut off. Vantage Systems. I typed it in and watched their investor site load. They'd gone public 2 years earlier. A modest IPO, respectable growth. But I remembered something about them even before that. My old company had considered partnering with them. We'd conducted due diligence, and I had seen a red flag. Back then, it had been a small detail, a discrepancy in vendor contracts and R&D allocation. Too small to matter at the time. But now, I had time. I had motive. And I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, Sunday, I started digging. Vantage's Q3 filings were clean, almost too clean. Consistent revenue growth, minimal losses. But the breakdown of their licensing income didn't match the patent activity I was tracking through the Federal Registry. That wasn't just odd. It was potentially misleading. They were recognizing income from software licenses that hadn't actually cleared final approval. In accounting terms, revenue pulled forward. Not illegal, but unethical. And if investors found out, it could get messy. The next thing I did was simple. I took screenshots, filed PDFs, created a burner email. Then I wrote a short anonymous tip and sent it to a watchdog blog run by ex-analysts. I didn't say much, just dropped a few numbers, a few keywords, enough to catch the eye of someone who knew what to look for. Licensing revenue discrepancies and inflated R&D valuations. Vantage Systems. Q3 might be worth a second glance. No signature, just initials. JL. Monday morning, I didn't expect much. But at 9:52 a.m., my phone buzzed with a news alert. Vantage Systems facing scrutiny over Q3 reporting practices after anonymous post goes viral on finance forums. By noon, their stock had dropped 3.5%. Not a crash, not yet, but enough to spook institutional investors. At 1:16 p.m., someone emailed my old consulting site, a private equity firm I'd worked with once, years ago. Jessica, not sure if you're still active, but we saw a breakdown online that looks a lot like your work. If you're open to consulting again, we have a situation that could use your eyes. And just like that, I wasn't unemployed anymore. That night, Thomas called me. The first time in months. Jess, he said, his voice tight. You were right. Something's happening. We got a memo about an internal audit. I didn't answer immediately. Did you know about this? He asked. There it was. The suspicion. The subtle fear. Why would I know anything, Thomas? I'm just the unwanted sister, remember? Silence. I didn't write that, he mumbled. But you didn't stop it. And that, I thought, was worse. By Wednesday, Vantage Systems stock had dipped 6.2%, and reporters had started poking around. They'd received anonymous documentation, some of which had come from me. I hadn't shared anything private. No confidential files. Just public records that told a very different story when looked at side by side. It wasn't about taking them down. Not yet. It was about reminding them that I see what they try to hide. By Friday, I had a new consulting contract. Short-term, high-paying. The kind of gig you land when people remember that behind the quiet compliance officer was a forensic mind. I didn't post about it, didn't gloat. But I did buy myself a decent espresso machine. Small celebrations matter when you're rebuilding. And then, just as I sat down to catch my breath, I received a LinkedIn message from Vantage's CEO. Jessica, I'd like to speak privately, if possible. I think we may have started off on the wrong foot. No apology, just a forced olive branch. I smiled, because he didn't know what was coming next. The CEO thought I'd be flattered. He didn't realize the board already had my name. They weren't reaching out for small talk. They were about to make a desperate offer. And they had no idea how prepared I already was. The message from Vantage's CEO sat in my inbox all night. Jessica, I'd like to speak privately if possible. I think we may have started off on the wrong foot. He didn't include a phone number, just a vague invitation and a calendar link. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood for rehearsed charm or corporate backpedaling. But the next morning, an email from a different name popped up. Jessica, I'm reaching out on behalf of the board. We believe your insight could be valuable in light of recent market activity. Please let me know if you're open to a confidential conversation. That name, Elena Burns, rang a bell. Former SEC auditor, now a non-executive director at Vantage. And unlike the CEO, she was someone who actually read financial statements. I replied with a short sentence. I'm available Wednesday morning. Please send the NDA. The Zoom call was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. I dressed like I was going into battle. Fitted blazer, clean hair, eyes sharp. Even if they couldn't see my shoes, I wore heels. It's a mindset. When the screen blinked to life, I found myself facing not just Elena, but 3 other board members. All older, all male, all polite in that overly careful way that meant they were nervous. Thank you for joining us, Jessica, Elena said. We're aware you may have noticed certain inconsistencies in our reporting. You could say that, I replied. One of the board members leaned forward. We believe there may have been a series of oversights in how executive reports were assembled. I cut in calmly. Oversights don't usually show patterns across 3 consecutive quarters, and they don't line up perfectly with executive stock grants. The silence on the call stretched long. One of them cleared his throat. Look, we'll be candid, Elena said. The situation is escalating. We want to bring someone in to conduct an internal review. Quietly, discreetly. You want someone outside the company. Someone the regulators would trust. Someone with a clean record who understands both finance and compliance. They didn't say it outright, but I knew what they meant. The CEO's credibility was crumbling, and they needed someone to clean up before the real heat arrived. And you want me? I said. Elena nodded once. You flagged these patterns before anyone else. We believe you're uniquely positioned to help us. Contain this. It wasn't an apology. It was a job offer dressed as damage control. I asked for time to consider. I didn't need time. I ended the call and stared at my screen. This wasn't just about a consulting gig or a corporate cleanup. This was about the same man who let me be publicly humiliated, now being forced to acknowledge that I was the only person who could keep his empire from sinking. I dreamed about moments like this. But now that it was real, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused, ready, dangerous. I called Claire. Let me guess, she said. They want to hire you. Board wants an internal review, discreet, quiet, behind the CEO's back. And what do you want? I didn't answer right away, because I wasn't sure yet. Revenge? Closure? A seat at the table I'd been shoved away from? Or maybe I just wanted to remind them that ignoring people like me comes at a cost. I want the truth to have a voice, I said. Claire snorted. You sound like a movie trailer. I've been worse. That weekend, I met with Elena in person. A small cafe, no logos, no suits. She brought a folder. Inside, a preliminary scope, key personnel, initial concerns. She was careful with her words, but she didn't hide the fact that internal tensions were boiling. The CEO's been minimizing the numbers. The CFO is compliant or blind. We're not sure yet. And Thomas? I asked, sipping my coffee. Your brother? She glanced up, surprised. He's high on the internal shortlist for promotion. We assumed you knew. I froze. Promotion to what? Chief Strategy Officer, if things stabilize. So that's what this was. Thomas wasn't just some bystander in a bad culture. He was being groomed to rise even further, and that changed everything. Later that night, I pulled out my old compliance journals, the ones I used to keep when I was training staff on audit integrity. A line I'd written years ago jumped out at me. Numbers don't lie, but the people who present them do. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. When I walked into Vantage Systems that Monday morning, no one offered a welcome. There were no balloons, no introductions, no polite smiles. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a guest. I was something else entirely, a threat they hadn't figured out how to classify yet. The board had kept my arrival confidential. I was officially hired as an external compliance consultant to assist with financial realignment. Translation: I was there to quietly examine the rot, and everyone knew it, especially Thomas. He found me in the break room around 10 a.m., holding a mug with the company logo I'd once celebrated for him with champagne. Jess, he said, trying too hard to sound casual. Didn't realize you'd actually taken the job. I didn't look up from the coffee machine. Didn't realize you were up for Chief Strategy Officer. His expression faltered for a split second. Not enough for most people to catch, but I knew my brother. I saw it. It's not official, he said. They're just exploring options. Options that include giving you access to long-term growth plans and financial structuring? He tensed. You think I had something to do with the discrepancies? No, I said calmly. I think you've had your head in the sand, which is almost worse. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Don't worry. I'm not here for revenge, Thomas. I'm here for facts. But if you're part of the numbers that don't add up, you'll be in the report, family or not. That shut him up. I spent the next 2 days combing through internal files. Unlike most consultants, I wasn't looking at the top-level summaries. I went deep, into buried emails, Slack threads, unpublished memos. The cracks were everywhere. Deferred expenses logged inconsistently. Third-party payments routed through shells with no clear deliverables. And most importantly, a pattern of strategic disclosures timed just before stock option vesting. It was textbook executive manipulation. Not enough to scream fraud yet, but more than enough to raise regulatory eyebrows. And guess whose name kept appearing in the periphery? Thomas. Not front and center. Never the one signing. But often CC'd. Often present. Always silent. He wasn't orchestrating the schemes, but he wasn't questioning them either. He was protecting his trajectory. And suddenly, the unemployed and unwanted place card made even more sense. They'd tried to discredit me because they knew what I might find if I ever looked too closely. On Wednesday, I met with Elena to debrief. The pattern is worse than I expected, I said, handing her a file. 3/4, at least 4 executives involved, and selective reporting that could expose you to serious liability if regulators catch it first. She leafed through the pages, her face tightening. How confident are you? Confident enough not to care who gets uncomfortable. She nodded. We'll need to present findings to the full board next week, quietly. There's one more thing, I added. Your CEO isn't just negligent. He's been consolidating internal influence, removing dissenters from decision-making, and he's trying to push my brother into a top-level role he's not qualified for. We were told Thomas was a stabilizing presence. He's a convenient presence, and I think he's being set up to take the fall. That gave her pause. Can you prove it? Not yet, I said, but I will. That night, I sat in my apartment with the files spread across my table. Claire texted to check in. How's the mission going? Found the smoking gun yet? No gun, I replied. Just a slow leak in the foundation. Because here's the thing people don't understand about corruption. It's not always loud, not always dramatic. It's subtle, structural, institutionalized. And people like Thomas, they don't create the corruption. They benefit from staying quiet about it. That's what made him dangerous. On Friday, I stayed late. Most of the building was empty. I logged into the shared network archive using credentials Elena had secured. And that's where I found it. A memo draft from the CEO's executive assistant, never sent, never published. Subject line, strategic PR plan, mitigating fallout from potential audit findings. In the draft, if the reporting structure becomes compromised, we suggest repositioning recent promotions, T. Langford, as central to ongoing transparency reforms. Their proximity to internal changes allows a controlled narrative. My brother was the insurance policy, a scapegoat with a polished resume and a family name that sounded like loyalty. They were going to use him, and then discard him if the heat got too close. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to protect him. The big sister instinct doesn't die easy. But then I remembered the smirk he wore when I walked out of that dinner, the silence when my name was mocked, the way he never asked if I was okay. "You made your bed, Thomas," I whispered. I received the email at 7:03 a.m. No subject line. No signature. Just one sentence. "You might want to think twice before submitting that report." There was no sender listed, just a scrambled relay domain I couldn't trace without forensic tools. But I didn't need to trace it. I knew what it meant. Someone inside Vantage Systems knew what I was doing, and they wanted me to stop. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing my laptop. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't surprised. This is what happens when people in power feel exposed. They don't confront you directly. They isolate you. They cast doubt. They push back just enough to make you hesitate. But I didn't hesitate. I got dressed. Blazer, low heels, clear mind. If they wanted me out, they'd have to do more than send a veiled threat. That morning, Elena met me in a side conference room. I showed her the email. She didn't flinch. "They're testing you," she said calmly. "It means they're scared, which means you're close." How many people knew I was compiling the report? She considered that for a moment. Only the board. And Thomas. I raised an eyebrow. "You told my brother?" "Not directly," she said. "But your name came up in an executive prep meeting. The CEO asked about your presence. Thomas didn't speak up either way." Of course he didn't. Silence. His favorite form of loyalty. The report was nearly done. 48 pages. Detailed financial discrepancies, timelines, cross-reference transaction logs, and a breakdown of misleading disclosures, all matched with documented executive activity. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. If regulators saw this, Vantage Systems would face formal investigation within weeks. Stock prices would drop. Executives would fall. Possibly charges. And at the center of it, my brother's name. Not as a criminal, but as a bystander. A silent figure in rooms where the wrong decisions were being made. Was I willing to do that? To scorch the earth? Even if it meant burning him with it? That night, I left the office late. Again. The parking garage was nearly empty. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat when I noticed something on the windshield. A printed piece of paper. Folded once. No note. No message. Just a single screenshot. A line from my report. A paragraph about Thomas. Highlighted. Someone had accessed my files. Someone wanted me to know that they could get to me. Or worse, that they could use my own work to discredit me. For the first time since this started, I felt it. Not fear, not guilt. Clarity. They weren't just protecting a company, they were protecting themselves. And people like me, women who weren't supposed to cause problems, we were expendable. But not this time. The next day, I met Thomas in the cafe across from the office. He was already seated, phone in hand, coffee untouched. He didn't look up when I sat down. "You made your point," he said. "Everyone's talking about your presence. The CEO's furious. You've made a mess. I'm cleaning one up." "At my expense?" I didn't blink. "You knew. You were in those meetings. You saw the numbers. That doesn't mean I caused anything." "No," I said softly. "It just means you let it happen. And now you want me to protect you." His jaw tightened. "I'm your brother, Jess. And I was your sister the night you watched them laugh at me. You said nothing then. Why should I protect you now?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You think exposing this will give you closure? You'll just be a footnote in another scandal. No one cares about compliance consultants, Jess." I stood. "They will when she's the one who saw it all coming." I left him there, his coffee untouched, his future unraveling. That evening, I finalized the report. I added one final section. A summary of recommendations, including immediate removal of executive leadership and referral to external regulators. Then I attached the memo, encrypted the files, and hit send. Not to the board, to an external legal team that had worked with federal auditors. Whistleblower protection included. Because if they were going to try to erase me, I'd make sure I left a trail too loud to ignore. The following morning, I received a call. Not from Thomas. Not from Elena. From a journalist. "Jessica Langford, I'm covering internal whistleblower claims at Vantage Systems. Your name came up. Can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately, because I wasn't ready to go public. Not yet. But the fact that he had my name meant someone was leaking things already, either to shield themselves or to blame me. 2 days after I submitted the report, the CEO called an emergency leadership alignment meeting. Translation: damage control. He booked the entire top floor of the Vantage Systems building. Private dining room, catered breakfast, long oak conference table. The same space they'd used for Thomas's promotion dinner. I walked in exactly at 8:59 a.m., report binder in one hand, and silence wrapped around me like armor. The room was full. Executives, board members, department heads, and Thomas. He was seated near the end in a tailored suit, flipping through his phone like nothing was wrong. The CEO stood at the head of the table, a tight smile stretched across his face. "Jessica," he said, "thanks for joining us. We're here to realign on strategy after your recent documentation." He didn't say investigation. He didn't say whistleblower report. But everyone in the room knew. They'd read the report. They'd seen the charts, the memos, the discrepancies. They were scared. And they should have been. "You've caused quite a stir," the CEO continued, still smiling. "So we thought we'd let you clarify a few things. You know, set the record straight before rumors take hold." I smiled back, calm, professional. "You mean before regulators read the article that's going live in 2 hours?" His face twitched. "Excuse me?" "A journalist reached out," I said, setting the binder on the table. I verified what I could. The rest? They confirmed themselves. Internal leaks, former staff, investor correspondence. The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Coffee cups paused midair. Eyes darted between faces. "Jessica," Elena said gently, "are you sure?" "You hired me to tell the truth," I said. "And the truth doesn't belong in a drawer." I opened the binder. Let's walk through a few highlights, shall we? Page 1. Quarterly financial reporting inconsistencies, revenue recognition manipulation. Page 2. Executive stock timing patterns preceding market announcements. Page 3. Projected use of Thomas Langford as strategic fall guy in internal comms. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I let the words hang. The CEO shifted in his seat. "Now, hold on. That's speculation." "It's your assistant's memo," I said. "Page 31. Your notes are in the margins. Shall I read them?" He went quiet. Then I turned to Thomas. Slowly, deliberately. You could have stopped this months ago. You were in the room. You saw the numbers. You knew what they were doing. He didn't respond, but his hands clenched. And instead of speaking up, you stood by while they humiliated me at your promotion dinner. I didn't write that place card, he muttered. No, I said. You just watched me sit down in front of it. The room was frozen. So here's what's going to happen, I said, and I handed Elena a sealed envelope. My resignation, effective immediately. I've accepted a full-time role at a firm that values ethical oversight, and its analysts. I turned to the board. But I'm also submitting a final recommendation. Replace your CEO within 72 hours or I go public, under my real name. That did it. The CEO's mouth opened, ready to bark a response. But Elena raised her hand before he could speak. That won't be necessary, she said, voice even. We've already drafted a transition plan. Jessica, thank you for your service. I gathered my things. As I reached the door, I paused, turned, and looked at the man who had once called me a gold digger nobody. Oh, I said to the CEO, one last thing. I'd check your stock prices, if I were you. And this time, the room went silent. 3 weeks later, the headline read, Vantage CEO steps down amid financial review. Whistleblower report triggers board action. The article didn't name me, but it didn't need to. My phone buzzed nonstop. Former colleagues, analysts, even investors asking if I was available for advisory work. I wasn't. I'd already signed on as Director of Regulatory Strategy at a firm 3 times the size of Vantage, with better ethics and a healthier coffee budget. 1 month later, Claire and I sat on a rooftop watching the sun dip behind the skyline. So, she said, raising her glass. What now? Now? I smiled. Now I stopped shrinking. And Thomas? I shrugged. Still at Vantage, different office, smaller window, no promotion, no headline. Do you think he regrets it? He doesn't have to, I said. His silence already said enough. This story isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. The kind that doesn't come with applause, but with the quiet power of knowing you were right all along. To every woman who's been dismissed, belittled, or underestimated, let them laugh. Let them place you at the kids' table. Then smile. And build the table they'll one day beg to sit at.